right. So this story dropped weirdly enough on a Friday afternoon, which is generally not when you put forward massively good news. But up here in British Columbia, as a bit of background, we're mainly powered by hydroelectricity. We only have a couple gigawatts of wind capacity, and as a result, a lot of our decarbonization efforts can't just rely on switching the grid to make it cleaner. We have to tackle things like transport use, which we are doing. Our ZEV mandate kind of clobbers California, so it's a little bit of a yay BC here. And Also, another big factor is decarbonizing natural gas. Again, in the U.S., California has what's called a low carbon fuel standard that requires the carbon intensity of the gasoline sold to be reduced over time, whether it's through like addition of ethanol or other measures such as building charging stations, for example, to allow more people to buy electric vehicles. And so we have our first major project, like really major project in North America to reduce the carbon intensity of our natural gas. And what we have is a more than 200 megawatt wind farm to be put in the windiest place of BC, very close to hydroelectric dams, powering an electrolyzer of greater than 100 megawatts, probably closer to 150 megawatts. And what will happen with this hydrogen is it will be injected into the natural gas pipeline, the main trunk line that goes down BC into Washington State as well, and it'll have a concentration of about 3%. 3% is still within the limits whereby regulations and specifications, technological settings everything is designed to handle at least 5 and typically more than 10%. Now, on its own, you won't be able to get into a low carbon or nearly low carbon world if you're simply relying on natural gas, of course, because that's ultimately fossil carbon. The very interesting and promising thing that this does is it creates a massive scale of hydrogen production, which can initially be used to decarbonize natural gas. With effort and momentum, the province's probable goal will be to switch out the natural gas infrastructure for a parallel or to reuse the infrastructure for hydrogen, for pure hydrogen, basically, and allow then have clean electricity as well as clean molecules, if you will, for other purposes. Now, in the continental United States and in Hawaii, this probably isn't too big of a deal because a lot of your guys' electricity or energy use peaks in the summer. I guess maybe apart from California, perhaps. California, the overall energy use might peak in the summer. But I suppose Midwest, other coastal parts of the New England, your energy use peak in the winter. And then even though you might have a reasonable amount of wind, your solar definitely isn't going to help you there. So in British Columbia, we use about 1.5 times as much energy, like kilowatt hours, of natural gas as we use for regular electricity. So it's a very promising project. We'll have hydrogen at scale. We'll be able to use this to start peeling off carbon intensity from natural gas, as well as find other mechanisms for using the hydrogen. The British Columbia province's goals require that 15% of the energy in gas delivered in 2030, in natural gas delivered in 2030, be renewable. And so there's a lot of room to displace a lot of carbon, basically. Sorry, that was kind of a word jumble, but I didn't rehearse this like some politicians do.
It was a much better explanation than I could have managed. So let's
I'd say, Matthew, can you give us a quick, you were talking about using greener molecules or cleaner molecules or whatever. I was introduced in the article to two things I hadn't heard before. I believe, what was it? Blue gas, green.
Yes.
I'll let you drink.
Sure,
okay.
Sure.
So
yes.
what exactly is this?
So this is all about making labels that are sort of understandable. The green hydrogen would be hydrogen from renewable energy, conceivably hydrogen from nuclear perhaps as well, but hydrogen generated from electrolysis from clean electricity. So fairly simple green. Blue hydrogen, the term started for use in Europe, refers to hydrogen generated from hydrocarbons or from fossil hydrocarbons where the carbon is captured and then sequestered. Now, the ultimate expectation, and Bloomberg has written about, Bloomberg New Energy Finance has written about this, is that in due course, natural gas that's used in industry and for heating could be more cheaply replaced by green hydrogen as renewables get so amazingly cheap. But there will be times, or there will be some years and some areas where blue hydrogen, even with the cost of storage, of capture and storage, will be less expensive than electrolyzing hydrogen. Does that kind of cover the
Yeah,
response?
yeah. I thought that was an interesting distinction. And we've said on the show, we've kicked hydrogen around, quite a bit. But
Mhm.
the sticking point has always been that hydrogen is used more of an energy carrier than an energy source. That it
Mhm.
takes more energy to create the hydrogen than you actually get out of it. And the
Mhm.
one caveat we've always said is if you can green the manufacturing of the hydrogen,
Mhm.
then okay, we're on board. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're doing.
I think the major advantage with this project is more the Roger Bannister effect. So if you think of like a Tesla had this thing where electric
The
cars can
four
be,
minute mile guy.
yeah, performance vehicles. With this project, it's like, wow, we can actually make hydrogen at scale from renewables. Now we can find uses for it, and it's a hell of a lot easier to drive your costs down for fueling, and find customers once they know, hey, there's a plentiful source of fuel that either we have at hand or we can generate with a little bit of consultation with renewable energy developers, of whom there are gazillions nowadays.
So I think it's a leap to go from we're generating it renewably to that makes it a great transportation fuel. Um, we've talked about a lot of the problems, and generation of hydrogen is not really one of the big hurdles. It's
Mhm.
distribution and a lot of other issues, and even electrolyzing it. That there are materials in the in that process that are consumed, and also just putting it into the natural gas pipelines, you have to worry about hydrogen embrittlement. You're a hydrogen engineer. You should, I'm sure
Right.
you know more
That's
about
right.
that than I do. And at 2 or 3%, maybe it's not a problem, but you talked about ramping it up, and 15, maybe even 100% at some point. I don't know that the infrastructure that we have in place for natural gas would be able to handle that at all.
Correct. So beyond a certain percentage, European countries typically have legislated 10 to 15% before having to requiring or by engineering expert analysis upgrades to your system. The um, the I guess the first advantage is achieving scale with something of this sort in North America or indeed worldwide. The second point is with respect to infrastructure, that tends to get changed on a generational basis anyways. So as part of the United Kingdom's plans, again, their fairly northern climate, their natural gas usage spikes phenomenally in the winter. Heat pumps lose some efficiency at the colder temperatures they reach up there, and they have a six-phase plan to systematically switch over their natural gas systems to hydrogen systems in modules, basically, of at least the Britain, the main island. And so the conversion in British Columbia and elsewhere would have to be something similar. That takes time, but infrastructure you're always upgrading or maintaining over a long term anyway. So if you set a goal in the near term for a long term final point, you can have all the switch out of equipment on the pipelines as well as equipment in final use cases such as houses, for example,
Just like when
boilers
you
and things of that sort.
just like when you
So
switch your nozzles, your injectors from propane to natural gas.
that would be something analogous to that. I think the UK in the 60s went from city gas to natural gas. They're basically saying, well, now this generation, we're going to have to go from natural gas to hydrogen. There would be some technology, optimization required, but then you do have a fair amount of lead time to do this. You're not doing this all tomorrow. And yeah, basically, it's a system-wide impact, and that allows you to have the flexibility of something apart from relatively recently generated electricity to work with, basically. So again, in California, Hawaii, other southern climates, you're in a great shape to like not have natural gas, for example, go to new houses, not have any gas energy inputs, but in somewhere like New York or Kansas or most parts of Canada, well, all of Canada really, there is probably a resilience backup benefit to having some gas able to come in apart from a battery, parts of which only cycle a couple times a year, right? You might cycle part of it daily, but the actual cost of that last portion could get onerous if you're only cycling it periodically.
So, in the transition period, are they extracting the hydrogen back out? Does it burn hotter? Does it burn more
Right, so
powerfully? How does this work?
Got it. So for this particular project, it's just being put into the pipeline. Through some of the work that I've done with folks involved in this type of activity, we have, for example, right now an effort to build a LNG pipeline to the coast to ship LNG to Asia. Now, a magnificent thing about LNG is that when you take the natural gas and liquefy it, you're already putting a lot of energy into making the stuff cold. If you blend in hydrogen and or have the pipelines able to accept a certain amount of hydrogen, then you only have to take the hydrogen from that already low temperature somewhat further to liquefy it. And then you'd be able to get LNG carriers going out as well as liquid hydrogen carriers, or alternately hydrogen in some other form, like a chemically bound form, something of that sort. So the expectation is that there would be parallel paths where some clients or some consumers might, like a large pulp mill, a large piece of industry, might be who is a large user of natural gas. It might be cheaper to have them switch over, use cheaply produced hydrogen instead, and therefore get up to that 15% of energy delivered by natural gas services be renewable, than to try and convert the entire thing to accept 15%, because there's always going to be like one brand of fireplace or whatever which is just sort of spits a little bit or is suboptimal at those levels.
So it wouldn't be the existing customers that that receive this enriched fuel at the moment. They would get it.
It would be enriched. It would be regular customers getting the 3%,
Okay.
which is what this project will do. And again, the thing is with BC, we use more natural gas than electricity, so all of our bragging about clean hydro isn't all that awesome considering how much natural gas we use for our houses. At 3%, at 5%, everything works. At 10%, virtually everything works. I think there were one or two consumer product brands who had one or two products that didn't work optimally. But well before then, the focus will be on fuel switching individual large carriers to hydrogen off natural gas, and then achieving this decarbonization of gas molecules, if you will.
So you're going to be. So is this kind of like flex fuel is in automobiles?
Yeah.
That would be yes. That would be That's a good metaphor to use. Yes. Although flex fuels. Well,
that's a whole different.
It should be somewhat cleaner, I suppose, or more successful than flex fuels have been.
It's a corny solution.
Right. Apart from Brazil has an amazing has had some amazing success, but yes.
Yeah. Does it burn hotter, or does it burn more efficient, or?
It burns. That's a good point. I once had those memorized. It burns pretty comparably hot. It carries 1/3 the energy per unit volume as natural gas, so you would have to increase flows eventually.
So it's a lot like flex fuel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yes.
So you're just going to, this is a starter project to put 3% into the natural gas lines of hydrogen. And that will flow to whatever customers are hooked to the natural gas line. They will receive that 3% in their furnace or their industrial heaters or whatever they're using natural gas for today. And it will burn that additional 3% along with 97% of natural gas in whatever existing infrastructure exists today.
Is fully compatible. That's right.
Yeah.
So,
but does it affect the taste of your dinner on the stove?
Good question.
That's more your cooking, I think, the variability in your cooking than the fuel variability. But yes, so that is correct. Now, the treating chemicals as heat is like ridiculously wasteful. Natural gas is much more valuable as a precursor to plastics preferably not single-use plastics, but then just burning them for heat value. And so the gravity, the market gravity, if you will be to pull this hydrogen into higher value use cases, one of which is fuel. When we think about trucking applications in particular, you can be much more expensive as hydrogen and still be competitive with diesel, as opposed to on natural gas in North America on a purely heat basis. So this first project really brings volume. It's like, hey, we have a 100 megawatt or 150 megawatt electrolyzer that will on its own like double that. That is like the yearly production of electrolyzers at the moment in the world. It's quite tiny. And so that will kick off cost declines. The availability of this fuel suddenly has already started to have trucking fleets saying, okay, well, look, if this stuff is being made, then maybe we have some diesel vehicles, up here in the north, where we can try this out on some of our routes, which we don't think are already adequately covered by batteries. And again, it's a very complementary thing. Everywhere batteries work well, batteries should absolutely be used. Everywhere that hydrogen works well, there's no reason to try and jam a battery in there. So in my experience, speaking with the BC Trucking Association, their use case is actually much more rigorous than a California one. And so for their long-haul trucks, they're very interested in hydrogen, for example. But for urban delivery trucks, absolutely, we have ample cheap electricity as long as you can bring in the infrastructure and don't cause substation builds from the utility. Absolutely go nuts.
So are they going to go with like a Nikola and go fuel cell, or are they going to do like BMW and just burn the hydrogen in
they would be fuel cell based. So the interesting one of the interesting charts they showed was that the high-end California truck, like the train, like a double trailer kind of a thing, was more like the BC mid-range in terms of weight plus range required between cities or things of that sort. But again, anywhere that I guess emphasizing my technology agnosticism, I love all my zero emission solutions equally, and so there's everything right with getting battery trucks if they happen to work for someone.
Okay. So basically, you're creating you're trying to start a market. You're producing hydrogen. You've got some place to place it to be used. Maybe not ideally where you'd like it used, but you have a reason for producing it, putting it into the infrastructure, and then letting people know it's available for other purposes because you're already making it.
That's right. Again, it's this Roger Bannister kind of a thing where this is the first time in North America you're going to have this enormous supply created, a demonstration. Wow, this energy is available. We might have to build other projects to actually generate some for ourselves. But this is kind of this is like taking off the handcuffs of, natural gas reforming, which had earlier been commented on. And we have a low carbon fuel standard, much as California does. So when used as a fuel, it is possible to get credits for electric vehicles or for electric infrastructure, and for hydrogen infrastructure and for hydrogen fuel, in order to drive our emissions process down. So yeah, it's we get scale, we get attention, and then we build from there, exactly as has happened with battery electric vehicles.
Is there a way to? I don't want to boil this down too much, but I mean, is there a way to say? So is this obviously it's a step for hydrogen? I mean, but Matthew, do you think that this is going to lead to something else, or are we just really still trying to stimulate the market? I mean, are we going to see?
So I think the market, at least in BC and Quebec, so the two provinces in Canada with their own carbon tax are BC and Quebec. At least we started. Our federal government just got reelected. The federal government has imposed a carbon tax on the recalcitrant provinces. But in BC and Quebec, we have hydropower. So it was easy, and no oil sector, basically. So it was easy to put in a carbon tax. That was easy, but that also made everyone realize that, wow, we really need to decarbonize transport. We can't just switch from coal to like natural gas and renewables and give ourselves a pat on the back. So I can't speak to specifics, but there are definitely, there are pilots and sort of proposals and RFIs in process that I might be able to talk about subsequently. Now, these won't have the same kinds of volumes as we'll get with electric battery options in the first number of years, but they will again round out that full spectrum of solutions, both on the trucking side, trains, marine, and even flight somewhat. We have a very cool company you probably covered already, Harbor Air, which demoed a test flight of its battery electric Otter seaplane. And,
yes, we did. We covered that.
Yep. And so for somewhat longer journeys, there is actually a California and UK-based company, Zero Avia, who is prepping their own 20 to 50 seater for sort of smallish regional flights.
Wow.
On fuel cell?
Fuel cells. And the fascinating thing is they don't even need the 700 atmospheres pressure. I think it's 10,000 psi that cars use. They can actually get most of their distance on 200 miles on 350 bar, which is the lower pressure that forklifts and regular trucks use with respect to hydrogen. It's a fascinating trade-off where basically if you go higher pressure, you need a stronger tank. Stronger tank means heavier and bigger, and that kind of gums up the aerodynamics for a plane. So it's this fascinating engineering optimization that they've been doing in terms of what's the optimum pressure versus weight of container to carry this hydrogen for this plane.
Now, does the hydrogen on board also make the plane lighter?
It's not helium, Tony.
That's fascinating. I don't think it wouldn't make it lighter because it is mass, but compared to a liquid fuel, yes, it's. I'm sure the pilots will have that helium voice as well.
That would be awesome. Hello, this is your captain speaking. We're preparing to land.
I think if you hop hydrogen,
it might be a
die.
tough sell to passengers to get on an airship vehicle that's powered by hydrogen.
That's right. Yeah, that's
so. Is it?
What's the onboard movie?
Yeah.
Hindenburg too. It's okay.
Yes.
Come on.
Yeah.
It's okay.
So
what could go wrong?
No one would use that word.
Non-name list or something,
Right.
It is built off an existing frame, so it's like a glider. Essentially, they pulled out for the first designs. They've pulled out an existing, was it a Cessna? Not a Cessna, but pulled out an aircraft from an existing manufacturer, and then retrofitted in the fuel cell stack with the fuel and other ancillary components.
Do you know if when they use hydrogen as a fuel, they're going to inject an artificial smell like they do to natural gas? So
right.
If there's a leak, people will smell it.
That's right. So that has been discussed for a while. If and when they switch over to pure hydrogen for a natural gas pipeline, I would imagine they would do that. Again, because it's colorless, odorless. It's again like natural gas, and so I would expect that would be the case. Now they don't use that in vehicles, but I would imagine that they would have something like that for safety for a gas services. Again, to make sure that any leaks are easily detected and absolutely public safety is the first priority.
So on the 09 Honda Clarity, the purple one. Rather than a dome light, you actually had a hydrogen sniffer, and if it sniffed hydrogen, it would shut down the system.
Right. Yes. So that is, I believe, a common feature in all the commercial vehicles there. Yeah.
I think we should get to vote on what smell they're going to put in hydrogen.